In 2012, the Southern Pine Inspection Bureau was forced to do something the lumber industry had never done before. After destroying over 7,400 pieces of commercial lumber in laboratory testing, they officially downgraded the strength ratings of southern yellow pine by 25 to 30%. The wood that frames nearly every home in the American South could no longer meet its own published specifications. The boards you buy today are physically smaller, biologically weaker, and more likely to warp than anything sold a generation ago. Why is the lumber at your local hardware store fundamentally inferior to the wood inside your grandparents' walls? And why has the industry quietly replaced the product without telling you? We are going to expose the science behind this silent downgrade and show you the only 3 materials you should actually trust to build with. If you have walked into a home improvement store recently, you probably assume the 2x4 you are picking up is the same product your grandfather used to frame his house in 1950. You see the same familiar stamp. You see the same species names: Douglas fir, southern pine, spruce. And you assume these boards are being cut from the same kinds of trees that built every great American structure, from colonial farmhouses to the Brooklyn Bridge. That is an illusion. The reality is that nearly every piece of dimensional lumber sold in the United States today comes from a plantation tree that was grown in a field like a crop of corn, pumped full of fertilizer, and chopped down before its 25th birthday. These trees never competed for sunlight in a dense forest. They never developed the tight grain and dense heartwood that made American lumber the envy of the world. They are fast food trees, and the industry is selling them to you at premium prices while pretending nothing has changed. But here is what the grading stamps do not tell you. In 1985, the United States Department of Agriculture published a paper with a title that should have been a national scandal. It was called Weak Wood: Fast-Grown Trees Make Problem Lumber. That was 40 years ago, and the problem has only gotten worse. To understand why modern lumber is so weak, you need to understand what made the old stuff so strong. Before the 1950s, most lumber in America came from old-growth forests. These were trees that had been growing for 200 to 500 years in dense stands, where they competed fiercely with their neighbors for every inch of sunlight. That competition forced them to grow slowly. A slow-growing tree puts down narrow annual rings, sometimes 20 to 25 rings packed into a single inch of wood. Each of those rings contains a high proportion of dense latewood, which is where the structural strength lives. The more latewood per inch, the harder and stronger the board. Old-growth trees also develop massive heartwood cores saturated with natural resins that resist rot and insects. When builders today gut a Victorian home or tear apart a barn from the 1800s, they find framing lumber that is rock solid and nearly impossible to drive a nail through. That is not nostalgia. That is the physical result of centuries of slow, competitive growth. Now here is the turning point that changed everything. After World War II, America needed millions of new homes, and it needed them fast. Private tree planting in the United States increased 90-fold between 1946 and 1976. The old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest were being logged at an unsustainable rate, and when the northern spotted owl was listed as a threatened species in 1990, the federal government effectively shut down 80% of its timber program through the Northwest Forest Plan of 1994. Federal timber harvest dropped from nearly 5 billion board feet per year to barely 1 billion. The slack was picked up entirely by privately owned pine plantations in the American South. Companies like Weyerhaeuser, which controls over 10 million acres of timberland, began managing forests the way factory farms manage chickens: plant the seedlings in rows, spray herbicides to kill the competition, fertilize heavily, and harvest everything in 25 to 35 years. But cutting a tree at 25 years creates a biological problem that no amount of engineering can fix. Every tree produces 2 types of wood. The outer rings are called mature wood. This is the dense, stable, strong material that made old-growth lumber legendary. But the inner core, the first 15 to 20 rings growing outward from the center of the trunk, is called juvenile wood. Juvenile wood has shorter fibers, thinner cell walls, lower density, and dramatically less strength. The United States Department of Agriculture Forest Products Laboratory has studied this extensively. Their research found that lumber composed entirely of juvenile wood has only 45 to 63% of the tensile strength and stiffness of mature wood. It also exhibits 10 times the longitudinal shrinkage, which is the scientific explanation for why modern lumber warps, twists, and cups within days of installation. Here is the math that damns the entire plantation model. If you cut a tree at 25 years and juvenile wood occupies the first 15 to 20 rings, then roughly half or more of every log is made up of this weak core material. A researcher at the USDA found that when sawmills cut boards from fast-grown plantation logs under 20 years old, only 10% of the tested pieces met the required design stiffness values. That means 9 out of 10 boards coming off the mill were already below the engineering specifications that builders and architects rely on to keep your house standing. A peer-reviewed study from North Carolina State University tested commercially available No. 2 Southern Yellow Pine and found that modern boards average fewer than 5 growth rings per inch. Compare that to old-growth lumber, which routinely had 20 or more rings per inch. Boston Building Resources documented old-growth samples with nearly 10 times the growth rings per inch as their modern equivalents. One historic home builder photographed samples from 1918 and 2018 side by side and described the difference as like comparing granite to paper. But wait, it gets worse. Not only is the wood weaker ring for ring, but you are also getting less of it. Before 1900, a 2x4 was a true 2 inches by 4 inches. That is 8 square inches of cross-section. In 1924, the first national lumber standard reduced the dress dimension slightly. Then in 1961, at a meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona, the industry agreed to cut the 2x4 down to 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. That gives you 5.25 square inches. You have lost 34% of the wood compared to the original dimensions. The United States Department of Agriculture's own history of lumber sizing acknowledged that economic pressures had caused a decrease in standard sizes and that competition had tended to emphasize price over quality. So you are paying more for a smaller board made from a weaker tree, and the industry knew it. The 2012 Downgrade was the smoking gun. Remember that official strength reduction we mentioned at the start? Here is what the industry does not want you to know about the fallout. Overnight, span tables got shorter by approximately 2 feet for typical applications. That means a floor joist that used to safely stretch across a 14-foot room might now need a support beam in the middle. Architects who had always specified No. 2 Southern Pine suddenly had to upgrade to No. 1 or Select Structural to get the same performance, adding roughly 5% to framing costs. And the industry's own trade group admitted the cause with remarkable candor. The Southern Forest Products Association said that because of fast-growing and genetically altered species, pine trees grow more quickly than ever, leaving wider spaces between growth rings, and because tighter rings mean stronger lumber, southern yellow pine trees are no longer as strong as they once were. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is the lumber industry describing its own product. The consequences hit homeowners, builders, and first responders every single day. A survey of over 270 lumber dealers found that more than 30% reported quality as somewhat worse or much worse, with one dealer saying their unsellable lumber had increased by 100%. Framing contractors describe studs that twist and warp within a week of installation. One contractor building a school said the warping was so severe that a large percentage of the studs had to be replaced before the walls could be finished, and firefighters faced the most dangerous consequence of all. Underwriters Laboratories tested traditional solid lumber floor systems against modern engineered I-joist systems in a standard fire test. The solid lumber survived 18 to 19 minutes. The engineered I-joists collapsed in 6 minutes. An estimated 2/3 of new homes now use these lightweight systems. During the 2020 to 2022 lumber price spike, consumers paid record prices topping $1,500 per thousand board feet, nearly 3 times the previous record for wood that had already been officially downgraded. At peak prices, lumber added an estimated $30,000 to the cost of an average new single-family home. So if the entire lumber supply chain has been degraded, does that mean you should give up on building anything that lasts? Number. It means you need to stop shopping like a homeowner and start thinking like a structural engineer. There are three categories of material that will outperform anything at your local big box store. The first option is reclaimed old-growth lumber. When an old factory, barn, or warehouse gets demolished, the framing inside those buildings is often 100 or even 200 years old. That wood is denser, stronger, and more dimensionally stable than anything being produced today. Companies like Pioneer Millworks in Farmington, New York, and Longleaf Lumber in Cambridge, Massachusetts, specialize in salvaging and reselling this material. You can buy reclaimed structural Douglas fir joists for between $1.50 and $2.50 per board foot, which is a premium over new lumber but a fraction of what it would cost to find equivalent strength in modern products. The supply is limited and you need to check for embedded nails and potential lead paint, but the quality is incomparable. A structural engineer put it bluntly. He said that when renovating an older home, in most cases you cannot simply replace the existing wood with the same size of new growth wood and still maintain structural integrity. That tells you everything about how far the standard product has fallen. The second option is engineered lumber, and this is important to distinguish from the lightweight I-joists we mentioned earlier. Thin-webbed I-joists are designed to save material and cut costs, which is why they fail so quickly in a fire. But structural engineered beams are an entirely different category. Products like laminated veneer lumber, known as LVL, are manufactured by peeling thin veneers from logs, coating them with adhesive, and pressing them together under heat and pressure. This process eliminates every weakness of natural lumber. There are no knots, no splits, no warping, and the strength is remarkable. Testing has shown LVL beams to be 134% stronger than equivalent solid wood beams of the same dimensions. Glulam beams, which are made from layers of dimensional lumber bonded together, can span longer distances than solid timber while weighing 1/3 as much as concrete with comparable strength. Some of the original Glulam installations from 1934 are still in service after more than 90 years. But there is a third option that most Americans have never heard of. It is called Accoya, and it is made from fast-grown radiata pine that has been treated through a process called acetylation. This process chemically modifies the wood at the cellular level, making it 3 to 4 times more dimensionally stable than untreated lumber and virtually impervious to rot and insects. Accoya carries a 50-year above-ground warranty, and a new manufacturing plant in Kingsport, Tennessee is now producing it domestically. At roughly $6.50 per board foot, it is a premium product, but for any application exposed to the weather, it will outlast pressure-treated lumber by decades. The era of strong, reliable lumber from your local store is over, and the industry is counting on you not noticing. They are banking on the fact that you will see the familiar grading stamp, assume the wood is the same product it has always been, and never think to count the growth rings on the end of that board. But if you flip that 2x4 on its end and look at the grain, you will see the truth for yourself. Wide, loose rings with almost no latewood. That is the signature of a 20-year-old plantation tree that was engineered for speed, not strength. Every house built in this country is only as good as the wood inside its walls. And right now, the wood going into millions of new American homes is weaker, smaller, and less stable than anything sold in the last century. The 2012 downgrade was not a one-time correction. It was a warning that the raw material itself has fundamentally changed, and the building codes have not fully caught up. Do not let the lumber industry sell you a weaker product at a higher price and call it progress. Count the rings, check the grade. Demand better materials, and never underestimate the value of a piece of wood that took 100 years to grow. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like this.